My fellow runners, today I come to you with a message. No, a decree. Too long have we toiled and suffered under the thumb of corporate tyranny and oppression. Too long have we had our IDs illegally tagged, our runs unreasonably taxed, and our rigs unfairly trashed. Too long have we gone without an excuse to play data sucker. But today I say no more. Today I say we rebel. We band together and we demand in one unified voice, freedom! But not just any kind of freedom, mind you. The best kind. The kind that comes with a metric butt-ton of virus counters. Talking about Freedom Kumaho, the new Anarch ID we've all been waiting for. It's 4515, zero link. It says once per turn, you may remove X virus counters from your installed cards. To trash a card that you access at no cost, even if it can normally be trashed, X is that card's res or play cost. Also, his shirt has a frowny face on it. You can now never unsee that, and I'm not sorry. But anyway, for the next few years, this is our designated signature Anarch virus-themed ID, since noise is of course now gone, and now we have freedom. And he's not only Noise's replacement, he also kind of feels like a spin-off of Edward Kim with the similar ID ability, but the big issue with Noise we had was that he would automatically make any virus card better through his ability, so the answer to how many virus cards do you want in your Noise deck was yes. So, on the other hand, requires you to only focus on virus cards that build up a bunch of tokens, which is not all virus cards. So he works with specific virus cards. You're probably not going to put things like Tapworm with them. And he also requires you to build up those counters and establish board state, and then lose board state to use his ability, and it also makes him more vulnerable to purging. So it's still a very powerful virus-themed effect. It does it in a different way than usual, and I think Freedom's probably going to be pretty strong. There's a lot to unpack with building a deck, and there's a lot of ways you can build them. Definitely a lot of experimenting here. Now, the most obvious things to put Data Sucker, Amakua, Virus Breeding Ground, things that just sit there and passively collect you virus tokens so that you can use his ability. But the real thing with him is that we've never had to build a deck quite like a Freedom deck yet. It's going to take a lot of testing to get a Freedom deck just right, because you have to strike a very particular balance in your deck building that we really haven't had to deal with yet. It's like, for one, there's just so many virus cards in the game. It's like deck slots with him are going to be incredibly tight. There's going to be so many different weird things you can do, so many different virus effects. But also, a problem we've never really encountered before in deck building is finding the exact right amount of virus cards to fuel their effects and to fuel his ability. And now, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if, 3 Data Suckers and 3 Virus Breeding Grounds and 3 Incubators were enough to get away with a Freedom deck, because Corps like to play a lot of low-cost cards. And yes, by the way, you can remove 0 virus counters to trash a 0-cost card, which is hilarious. But you're going to have to be able to strike a very particular balance, having enough virus counters, A, to fuel your ID ability, B, to still get those counters for the abilities that those cards originally do, but also not to make purging hurt you too much. I think if playing a Freedom deck teaches you one thing as a player, it's going to be learning exactly how to gauge the value of a purge. Because under normal circumstances up until now, you would play as few viruses as possible. If you played Tapworm as your virus, that was it. That's all you put down as Tapworm. Or if you put down Lamprey, that's it. That's all you put down as Lamprey. Because purging just to get rid of Tapworm or just to get rid of Lamprey feels really crappy. But if the court purges to, wipe 800 virus counters off the board and completely shut off the runner for the next 5 or 6 turns, that's they'll gladly do that. They'll do it with a smile on their face. But yeah, there's no way there isn't a really good deck coming out of this ID. He's got so much flexibility. He's got a powerful effect. He's got so many cards to play with. There's, like, I don't know exactly, will it be tier 1, tier 2, tier 1.5, tier 1.375, I don't know, whatever. But there's no way that this guy does not have plenty of tools to make a strong, powerful, fun-to-play deck. Because of the new field of deck building he's exploring, there's going to be a lot of people testing him out, and there's going to be a lot of testing it's going to take to figure things out with him. I imagine there's going to be several different versions of good, viable decks. Also, there are a few matchup-specific things that should be noted. Freedom, because his ID works off of the res or play cost, not the trash cost of a card. This automatically gives him a substantial leg up against any form of asset spam, because the vast majority of cards that asset spam decks play are, obnoxious things like Pad Campaign and Jinja City Grid and all this stuff that's like 1 to 2 to res and 4 or 5 to trash. All this obnoxious crap that's super cheap to res and super expensive to trash. But like you can trash a Jinja City Grid for 1 virus token out of Freedom. You can trash a Jinja City Grid for 1 virus token. You can trash a Daily Business Show for 2 tokens. It's silly. Wait a second, I'm just thinking it. Could you trash a Mumbad Virtual Tour for 0? Does that work? I think it works. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it works. And that would be, if you could do, I want a video of that happening. It's just a whole new ball game of virus themed decks that are about to just spill over onto the playing field and onto the meta of the game. Like there's just going to be so much to play with. It's a lot to look forward to. And to follow up our trip to Virus Town, we've got, well, would you look at that? It's the son of Parasite. You thought it was going to be Hippo, but it was I, Tripano. 3 influence, 2 to install, 1 MU virus program. And it says, install it only on a piece of ice. When it has 5 or more virus counters on it, trash the host ice. And when your turn begins, stick a virus counter on it. So it's pretty obvious this is supposed to be some form of Parasite replacement. I mean, it has all the same stats and keywords as Parasite. It's just significantly weaker, aka balanced, because let's be real, Parasite was absurd. But more specifically, this doesn't lower the ice's strength while it's on it. It doesn't synchronize with strength-lowering things like Data Sucker and Ice Carver. Well, you can instant speed drop this on something, but it won't really accomplish anything without a huge combo. So there's a lot of things that Parasite did that made Parasite ridiculous that this can't do. But it can do one thing Parasite can't, and that's be put on an unresed piece of ice. Which, not sure how important that is, but it's something. Now, the big thing about this, though, is, before anyone freaks out and overreacts and starts putting 3 copies of this in every Antarctic like they did with Parasite, it should be noted that this really needs virus support to be good, really. There is virus support. There's the next card in this pack is a big card that works well with this, but things that let you move virus counters to other cards so that you can accelerate this one and make it take less than 5 turns to go off will make this a lot better. A hive mind with a bunch of counters on this makes this really nasty, and it can be recurred with clone ship and stuff. But one of the biggest things about this is that it doesn't give you value while it's on it. Parasite gradually lowered the strength of the ice and made it cheaper to get through. This only matters when it's full. And the thing about that is that, in a virus-themed deck with virus support, this is definitely worth slotting. Like in a Freedom deck, this could, even if it just sits there and is a virus counter battery, one turn virus counter battery, that's not bad. All by itself in a vacuum or in any non-virus themed deck, is it worth slotting? Probably not, at least not over the Cutlery. Because the thing to take note of is that this is a card that offers no real value whatsoever until 5 turns after you play it. So you put this down, and it has no effect on the board state at all, other than taking up an MU, until 5 turns later. That's, even though the effect is powerful, that's a long time to wait. Yeah, but I think the obvious point of this card is that this is intended to be a perk to playing Freedom. Like this is meant to be like, if you play Freedom and play a virus-themed deck with lots of virus support cards, this is a big bonus, is that you get to make Tripano good. You get to have enough virus support cards in your deck that you can play Tripano and make it, as close to Parasite as possible. I think this is clearly intended to be like, this is a perk to playing Freedom, and another card to consider putting in his decks. Outside of Freedom, I'm not expecting to see a lot of it, but in Freedom, there should be a good amount of this being played. Because even something that's close to Parasite is still really strong. Okay, then to finish off Anarch, we've got Contaminate. This is a 1-to-play, 1-influence event, and it says place 3 virus counters on an installed runner card with no hosted virus counters. So this is clearly the replacement for Surge, and it's pretty straightforward, but the clear point of this card is to help you get back on the board after a purge, or to refuel something that's empty, because you have to use it on something that doesn't have any counters on it. So if you've got, the most obvious thing to use this on is Amakua, because, well, everything works well with Amakua at this point, but that's the most obvious thing, is after a purge, get Amakua back up to 3, or you could refill your Imp, or if you're doing a virus-heavy deck, like a Freedom deck, the best thing to do would be to put this on a Hive Mind, and that would actually accelerate your Tripanos quite substantially. But the main point of this is to reset your board after a purge and help get back in the game earlier without having to wait a bajillion turns for your things to tick back up again. So how many of these will actually be played in virus decks? I'm really not sure. Getting back up to speed after a purge is pretty important, especially if you're doing any hive mind nonsense, but I'm probably not thinking 3 copies, maybe 1 or 2, but we'll see. I'm not actually sure how much play this one will see, but it'll probably pop up here and there. Alright, then to start off Criminals, we've got this really weird freaking card, but this is Embezzle. It's a 1-to-play run event, it's 3 influence. It says, make a run on HQ. If successful, instead of accessing cards, name, asset, ice, operation, or upgrade, then reveal 2 cards from HQ at random. Trash each revealed card that has the named type, then you gain 4 credits for each card trashed this way. And this is just, boy, this one is weird. Like, you gotta stare at this one a while to figure it out, but ultimately, like, I feel like this is a card that really, really could have been good, but the way it was printed, it's just not anywhere near consistent enough. Now, I think the idea behind it is to give Criminals hand disruption, like just not multi-axis like they usually have, but just straight up hand destruction. This is supposed to be kind of, sort of, like a criminal equivalent of wanton destruction, and like the idea behind this is make runs on HQ, trash cards out of the corpse hand, even if they can't normally be trashed, and make money for trashing them. And that sounds really, really cool. And a card that does that could absolutely be a strong, playable, fun-to-use card. But this one was just printed with bad numbers, honestly. There's so many ways that this could have been slightly tweaked or reworded that it would have been a lot better, but it just wasn't. Like, if this was reveal 3 and gain 3, that alone would have made it way better, or access 2 instead of just reveal 2, or something. There's a lot of ways this could have been slightly altered, and that slight change would have made it significantly better, because right now, and you got to name the right thing, you only get to reveal 2 cards, and then if you guessed right, you get the reward. So it's well, first of all, if you guess Asset or upgrade, you're probably against a deck that's spamming assets and upgrades, which means those aren't going to be in their hand, they're going to be on the field most of the time. So you're probably going to get the best use out of this naming ice or operation. So if you're against some kind of combo deck, maybe it could help a bit, but there are other ways for Criminal to deal with that. The only reason they'd be sitting on ice in their hand is if they're poor, and in which case there's probably other things you'd rather do at the time. I mean, it's again, like this feels so awkward to me. Like I wish I could play this card, because giving hand disruption and making money while trashing cards out of the corpse hand sounds amazing. Like it really does. That a card that did that viably would be great. It's just that this took that idea and just didn't execute it well enough. The numbers just aren't. The numbers here just aren't reliable enough. So, yeah, I wish I could play this card, but it's just not as strong as it should be. Then Crim gets another weird little card. This is Slipstream. It's yet another zero-cost resource, since Criminal seems to be getting an awful lot of those. It's 2 influence, it's virtual this time, and it says, whenever you pass a rezzed piece of ice, you may trash Slipstream. If you do, choose a piece of ice protecting a central server in the same position as the past iced. You are now approaching that ice. So this one can take a little bit to wrap your head around. So you make a run on a server, you pass a rezzed piece of ice, trash this, choose something on a central, go to the same position, and then have to break that piece of ice. So if you're the ideal use for this, best case scenario, is that you want to get into R&D or HQ. This is Criminal, so probably HQ. Instead of getting through like the 3 ice deep HQ, you can run the 1 ice on Archives. And then you can get past that 1 piece of ice on Archives, and then you trash this, and you would go to the innermost piece of ice on HQ, and then just have to deal with that. So, it's like, or if that 1 piece of ice is on a remote somewhere. So that's basically the main purpose of this card, and anything that only has 1 piece of ice in front of it lets you go through that to get to a central instead of getting through all the ice on a central. But even then, there has to be at least 3 ice on the central you want to get into, because this makes you still have to go back a piece of ice essentially, which is the part that really hurts it. So at bare minimum, you need a server with 1 piece of ice in front of it, and use that to get into a server with at least 3 ice in front of it, and then you are skipping 1 piece of ice. Because there's the first ice, and then this sends you to the other server, but you still have to get through the ice that this sends you to. So, 1 ice server slipping into a 3 ice server, you are saving yourself the cost of breaking 1 piece of ice. Or, so you can either use that, you can use it to skip that 1 piece of ice, or maybe you can try to use it to sneak around one really big piece of ice you don't want to have to deal with. And it's a cool effect. It is a cool, sneak door beta-y kind of effect, where you skip from one server to the other. So it is definitely a Criminal thing to do, and it sounds fun, but this is so awkward. This is so awkward and so situational. I think the fact that it essentially sends you back a piece of ice in exchange for getting to the other server is really what hurts it. I think that really is what hurts it, is that it basically sends you back a piece of ice, which makes it more specific and more situational. So again, just like the last card, it sounds fun. And if you had reworded it just a little bit differently, this could be like a cool, reasonably good card to play. But it's just not quite there. It's the way it's worded makes it a bit too situational to really be that great. So both the Crim cards feel like that. Like they could have been a lot better if they were just worded slightly differently. So then Shaper gets to start off with a pretty interesting new card. This is Lam? I'm going to go with Lam. But it's a 2 influence fractor. It's 4 to install, 2 MU, 2 strength. And it says, when you encounter a piece of ice, you may pay 2 credits to have it gain barrier until the end of the encounter. Use this ability only once per turn. 2 credits break any number of barrier subs, and 3 credits plus 6 strength. So it seems like Shaper is developing some kind of sub-theme where they have big fat 2MU icebreakers that do powerful but really expensive things. Like we had Mass Driver and all the MU things like Sage. Now we've got this thing, and Angolo coming in the next pack. So it seems like Shaper is developing a sub-theme of like 2MU expensive icebreakers that do really weird stuff. This one's probably one of the better of those. So the bottom line with LOM is that if you have 7 credits, you can get through literally any piece of ice, which is, yeah, that's not bad. You probably want to put this in a Mopus deck, of course, because using this is really expensive. But the bottom line with this is that you can, for $7, you can get past any piece of ice. It's okay against weak gear check things like vanilla. It's pretty good against huge barriers. But then again, you got to compare everything to Paperclip. This does break Chiashi for $5, which is even better than Paperclip, which is kind of funny. But of course, the 2 things that are really going on with this card and that everyone is interested in is A, Quetzal has to be able to use this somehow. Like, I'm not sure exactly how, but Quetzal's been feeling pretty bad after E3 went away. This has to do something good for Quetzal decks. And 2 is that Surfer, the whole Surfer kit combo is back with this. And I played a good amount of Surfer kit. It doesn't really work anymore after the whole MWL updates and everything. But this card single-handedly re-enables the whole Surfer combo nonsense deck. And actually, this is so good at doing that you don't actually have to play it out of kit. You can, but you actually don't need to. You just need Lam and Surfer, and once per turn, if you've got enough money, you can get through any server. Even breaking 1 piece of ice with Lam, you can get through any server for probably cheaper than it normally would have cost to get through that server. And it's something I'm definitely interested in doing, and the fact that you don't have to run it out of kit opens up some interesting possibilities for who you would run it out of. I'm guessing either Chaos Theory for the free MU, because you're probably going to want to run Mopus with it, or maybe even Cabanesa to go with this. So that's definitely the number one thing on everyone's mind, is that this single-handedly re-enables the Surfer combo, which is a really fun combo. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be trying to rekindle my Surfer combo Shaper nonsense flame with this card. Alright, after that we've got a new piece of hardware. This is I'm not even going to pretend I know how to pronounce that. I'm just surrendering that card name right now. But it's 4 influence, it's 1 to play, it's unique, and it says click, host it on an installed non-AI Icebreaker, and host Icebreaker returns to its base strength at the end of each turn rather than each encounter. So basically how cards like Gordian Blade do the Shaper thing of they keep their strength for the entire run, not just for that piece of ice. This extends that to the entire turn. Is that very useful? No, it really isn't. I'm sorry. even the Gordian Blade effect, where it just keeps your strength to the end of the run, means that the way you get value out of it, it is a nice little bonus to have, but the only thing that really disincentivizes is for the Corp to stack large ice of the same type in the same server. So now this may extend that a little bit to large ice of the same type in different servers, but those have to be multiple different servers that you plan on running in the same turn, or even running the same server over and over again. So you can click to move it from thing to thing, so that's good. It's not permanently glued to one breaker, but like the situations where this is going to actually save you money are really low. Plus, as soon as the Corp knows you're running it, they can play around it with their ice placement. So yeah, it's not playing this one. All right, then last for Shaper, we've got Compile. This is a 2-to-play, 3-influence run event. It says, make a run. The first time you encounter a piece of ice during this run, you may search your stack or heap for a program and install it, ignoring all costs. When the run ends, add that program to the bottom of your stack if it is still installed. And this is just a slightly different version of Test Run. Like, that's it, really. Like, Test Run costs 1 more to play, does basically the exact same thing, but just doesn't force you to make a run while you're doing it, but puts the card at the top of the deck instead of the bottom. And I think it's pretty clear that the vast majority of the time, putting that card back on top of your deck rather than the bottom of your deck is way, way better and worth the 1 extra cost to play. The one exception that I can think of is using it to fetch grappling hooks in a Cabanesa deck, because then it doesn't matter where they are, they'll just tutor them again. Outside of that, outside of that specific scenario, I'm not really seeing a reason why you would play this over Test Run. So maybe there's another reason out there, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But this is just a slightly different and most of the time inferior version of Test Run. Now for our 1 mini-faction card of this pack, we have Logic Bomb.
I got a nosebleed thinking about if there's nothing faster than light, how did the dark get there first?
So this is the Atom card, 5 influence. It's a virtual resource. It's 0 to play, and it says trash it, bypass a piece of ice you are currently encountering, lose any remaining clicks. And I think it's pretty clear this is very useful. Like a 0 to play card that you can stack and that just says walk past a piece of ice of your choice. Like there's no way this is not getting 3-of'd in basically every Atom deck from here on out. This is very, very strong. This alone could very well justify importing the Pirate suite into Atom, where you have the Kongamatos and Gabalis and grappling hooks and levies. Now adding this to the equation, Pirate Robot Atom could very well be a strong, viable way to build the deck. 5 influence, you're not really going to see this splash anywhere, which is probably a good thing because this is really strong. But let's talk about the lose any remaining clicks part, because off the top of your head, you're just like, yeah, you can play around that. Just run last click, no problem. But it does offer up a noticeable amount of counterplay, because pretty much every faction has some way to punish the runner for running last click. I mean, Jinteki has all its damage nonsense that it does. Wayland and NBN have any amount of things that do tags, data ravens or Pricex, or like just anything that tags the runner during a run. You're not like, this will make this a huge drawback, because now you're ending your turn tagged, and that's very bad. HB has the fewest ways to deal with it, but it does still have Ash. It does still have Ikawa Project. So if you use this, you can't steal the Ikawa Project unless you film critic it. So the lose any remaining clicks might be a little bit more of a drawback than you at first anticipate, but like I said, this is still a really strong card. Like, Atom players will be using this a lot. So yeah, this is a very strong card, and I fully expect Pirate Robot Atom to be a thing after this. And last up for runner, we've got Jackpot. It's a neutral resource, it's no influence, it's no money to install. It says when your turn begins, you may place a credit on it. Whenever an agenda is added to your score area, you may take any number of credits from it. If you do, trash it. So I guess the idea of this card is it's kind of supposed to keep you from losing a huge amount of tempo when you steal an agenda. Like if you have to pay a bunch of money to get into a server, you don't like then concede the next couple of turns to the corp. But the thing about this though is there's definitely something to be said about econ cards that build up and don't pay anything off until X happens. Now there was Caddy Jones and lots of people played Caddy Jones, sure, but for the most part, econ cards that don't do anything for a while until blank happens aren't very good because you're investing in that card and you're not getting anything back for X amount of time. Now, this is 0 to put down, and you gain a credit a turn, ideally, but still there's several issues with that. Like first of all, because it's once a turn and it dies once it goes off, you absolutely have to have 3 copies in the deck. Because and probably in a deck where you want to draw a lot of cards. You need 3 copies in the deck because you need to see this as soon as humanly possible. So it can start ticking up as early as possible. And it does, it's not unique, so they can stack, so that's good. And it is a may when you choose to take it off or not, and that's good. But still, that's 3 deck slots that you're spending on something where the condition for it to go off is for you to steal an agenda. So this is a card that does not directly help your deck do what it wants to do, rewards your deck for doing that thing, but doesn't help you do it. So it's like here's a bunch of cards you put in, that won't do anything until the rest of your deck, which is now smaller, do the thing that you're trying to do, if that makes sense. So, however, I can see a little bit of a niche use for it if you combo it with Fansite. Because Fansite should, if I understand correctly, Fansite should trigger this as well. So by adding Fansite to this, the number of triggers for this then double, for not only when you steal something, but from also when the corpse scores something. And if you then combo that with ShadowNet, which you're going to be playing anyway if you're playing Fansite, then all of a sudden, if you're playing a slow build-up runner deck, you get these down early, and later on, if the corporal tries to score an agenda, if that agenda doesn't win them the game, it might be a really serious decision on the corp's part, like, do I want to score that 2-pointer and put myself on game point, but the runner will then suddenly gain like 15 credits and have fodder to play their Sure Gamble for free and gain 9 more credits, or play their indexing again because they now have the money to do the runs for that, and yada yada yada. So if you add Fansite to this, I could see it gaining some viability because you've literally just doubled the amount of triggers it can have. And I could see that working in a Haley deck because Haley likes to run Fansite. Haley likes to run ShadowNet. This is another 0-cost resource. Haley runs that Laguna Lavasco district cards. You draw a bajillion cards, and it's a slow, grindy, slow, dirtily late game shaper deck. So if this goes anywhere, I'm betting it goes in Haley, and it might be pretty decent in there. But outside of that, I'm not seeing a ton of like competitively viable use for it. Okay, then let's start off Corp with a new piece of Bioroid Ice. This is Kamali 1.0. Sentry, 6 to res, 3 strength, 4 influence. It's got the 1.0 click to break nonsense. It has 3 subs. Do 1 brain damage unless the runner trashes an installed resource. Do 1 brain damage unless the runner trashes an installed piece of hardware. And do 1 brain damage unless the runner trashes an installed program. So this is a piece of ice that really exists just for its face check value. Because the 3 clicks to get through it are obnoxious, but people are running first click for Fairchild 3 anyway. But the doing 3 brain damage or wrecking a bunch of the runner's rig is pretty nasty. But unless the runner face plants into this unprepared, it's not really worth the investment at 3 strength. If it had a little higher strength, or well, really if it just had a little higher strength, I'd probably be more on board with it. I am contractually obligated by my friend to inform you all that the proper way to play against this as Anarch is to just pay 3 to break the first 2 subs, then let the trash a program fire and just trash MK Ultra and reinstall it when you need it, which is actually better than paying to break all the subs, which is pretty funny. Against Mimic, this is just terrible. So, like, again, this is really weak against Anarchs, and Anarchs are really strong. So that's the biggest problem with this right now. It is not good against Anarchs, and Anarchs are really strong right now. Plus, it's also not very good against Nanotech, and that's the big Shaper killer right now too. Yeah, if there's 2 pieces of ice in a server, and this is one of them, Shaper breaks it for 3 credits. So that's, yeah, it's just this is really only valuable for its for an unprepared face check, and a smart runner is going to minimize that ever happening. So plus, if you want you also have your 6 to res ice slot, which is Fairchild 3. If you want something else that's 6 to res in Bioroid, I would much rather have Vikram 1.0 than this, which is a 6 to res 3 sub 1.0 Sentry, but just a lot better than this. So, like, yeah, I would much rather have Vikram 1.0 in my deck over Kamali 1.0. Then we've got a spiffy new agenda for HB. This is a new 4-2. This is Remote Enforcement. It says when you score it, you may search R&D for a piece of ice, install it protecting a remote server, paying its install cost, and res it ignoring its res cost, then shuffle R&D. And continuing the clear trend of releasing like fixed versions of previous cards that were taken out from rotation in the MWL, this is the fixed version of Accelerated Beta Test.
Do it!
I think that's pretty obvious. This is a watered down and like more well balanced version of ABT.
Just do it!
And it's this is pretty solid. This is honestly pretty solid. I mean, being a 4-2 obviously makes it harder to score out, and an effect like this really should be on a 4-2. You know, putting this on a 3-2 like I had before was a bit much. The effect is more, I'm going to say, normalized compared to ABT. You can't whiff, you can't suddenly barf out 3 giant ice. You're guaranteed 1 piece of ice of your choice, and you do get to search your deck for it, which is really important. So obviously the way you play this card is in some kind of rush or glaciary deck, where you put like 1 or 2 copies of like big fat whopping ice that you don't plan to normally install and res these 95% of the time. They're there just for you to snag with Remote Enforcement and slap down for free. So the obvious biggest target for this is Fairchild, you know, the big fat giant Fairchild 4, because slapping that on a remote server is for free is pretty spiffy. Now it does specifically just say res cost, not ignoring all costs. So you can't use Archer with this. You can't use Archer with this, which is disappointing, but you can use Surveyor in a month, which is probably just as good. So yeah, but the most of the time what we're going to see with this is people snagging the giant Fairchild and resing it for free. And how useful is this compared to other available 4-2s? That's a good question, actually, because there's that one that gives you money per Bioroids, and there's Corporate Sales Team, and those are the 2 you really have to compare it against. Corporate Sales Team is what's going to have the most competition with. So it's either 10 credits over 5 turns or getting your giant piece of ice right now. And well, honestly, if you're going to do the whole grab, you know, put a singleton giant ice in your deck, I'd probably go with this. Honestly, if you're doing like a big glaciary deck, I'd probably go with this because it does help you. Close out the game right away. If you get a scoring window and you score this and you immediately create another scoring window because now they have to get through Fairchild 4, as I like to call it, then that's pretty solid. So yeah, I mean, there are viable arguments depending on what deck you're in to play this or Corporate Sales Team, but there's definitely decks that can use this. All right, last up for HB, we've got. Ugh, God, what the sweet Jesus, lady, what is wrong with your face? Ah. Anyway, this creepypasta wannabe is Warden Fatuma. It's a 1-to-res, 5-to-trash asset. It's unique, it's 2 influence, and it says each piece of resed Bioroid ice gains the runner loses a click if able before all of its other subroutines. And, well, this is kind of a hard card to evaluate. I mean, it is an asset, which means you probably have to protect it, but it's also 5 to trash, so it's a pain in the ass to get rid of. But like, what decks would you slot this into, is the question. And I'm not really sure, but the effect is that all your Bioroid ice gain an extra subroutine, which is impactful, especially if it's early game and the runner is still trying to click through things. That's definitely an impactful thing. It also means that Fairchild 3 is guaranteed to have a subroutine go off, so that's not bad. And then even when the runner has all the rigs set up, this essentially means that all your ice cost more money to get through, which makes me want to compare it to lag time a lot, or the Stronger Together effect, which in that sense it's probably pretty comparable to it, because all your ice being +1 strength versus all your ice being +1 subroutine, for most intents and purposes, either way, that means each piece of ice is 1 more strength, was 1 more credit to get through. With most breakers that get played, it means all your ice is 1 more credit to get through. Though I suppose, well, maybe that's a deck you'd put this. You could put this in Stronger Together, then you have the +1 strength and the +1 sub, and just make your ice super obnoxious. I guess that's a possibility. Whereas lag time is a current, and you have to steal an agenda or play your own current to get rid of it. This is 5 to trash. Like, that's not cheap. Then the runner has to compare, even if you leave it out naked, the runner has to compare, like, paying to get through 5 pieces of ice versus just paying to trash this one time. So, not really sure. It might have a little niche somewhere, maybe. But what is it competing with in other deck slots? So, I'm not expecting to see this in a lot of places, but maybe someone could figure out like a solid glaciary use for it. Just God, that smile. It's the teeth. It's the teeth that scare you. It is. Anyway, for Jinteki, let's start things off with a new 4-2. This is Viral Weaponization. It says, when the turn on which you scored it ends, do 1 net damage for each card in the grip. And I feel really sorry for this card. Like I genuinely do, because I want to like this so badly. I really, really do. But this is a prime example of a card that should be good. Like, this should, by all accounts, be a solid card, but the one glaring problem with it is that it competes with other very, very important things. So, the thing with Viral Weaponization is, it should be a good card. That's a strong, powerful effect, but it has to compete with other 4-2 slots, namely Nisei Mark II. And there are some very nice tempo advantages to playing a card like Viral Weaponization. Like, that's what this is. This is a tempo card. If you can surprise the runner with it, this can be devastating. This can absolutely turn the game in your favor if you make the runner chuck their whole hand when they weren't expecting to, even if they see it coming. That can still force their hand to make them play a lot of cards they aren't ready to play yet, just to keep them from getting blown up. And even that can open a scoring window for you. Now, of course, if you play this and only have like 1 or 2 cards in their hand, then it's not going to be as good. But And like a fast, aggressive, rushy deck, this could see some kind of play, but even then, is that early tempo of clearing the runner's hand one time, is that worth the Nisei token? And 99% of the time, the answer is probably going to be no. So most of the Jinteki decks that play 4/2s would still much rather have that Nisei token to like definitively close out the game than use this, which might give them a decent help right after you score it. And that sucks because, like, I like this card. Like I do. I said I want to like this card. This is a fun, cool effect, with definite impact on the game. But even in terms of using it in a damage deck, you have to think about, well, what if you put this in PE? It's like, well, right now, that's not a good option because just because it competes with Show of Force, which can straight up flatline people in the game, which this cannot do, in case you didn't notice. The reason it says turn on which you scored it ends, blah, 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 is because this was specifically designed that you cannot flatline people with this ever. Right? If somebody does figure out a way to turn viral weaponization into a guaranteed flatline as soon as you score it, this card will be banned immediately. So, but I don't, as far as I can think of, there's not a way to do that without being super absurdly convoluted. But still, it's a cool card. It's a nifty card, and I like it. And there's, I hope like maybe after Show of Force rotates out, this will find a home in like PE style decks, maybe. But the only real problem with it right now is that it competes with Nisei Mark II. And I feel sorry for this agenda. I really do. I want to play it, but Nisei Mark II exists. So still, it's definitely a nice attempt in trying to make 4/2s with aggressive effects. Like we had our Intimidation a bit ago. This is definitely a good step towards trying to make 4/2s with like strong, aggressive, tempo-based effects that try to force action on the runner. Because this will definitely help. Cards like this will definitely help against like slow, dirtily runner opponents. This will like force them into action, and that's good. It's just not quite there, but it's definitely a good try. After that, we've got a new piece of ice. This is Envelope. It's barrier. It's 4 to res. It's 3 strength, 2 influence, 2 subs, do 1 net damage, and end the run. Just, it's so cute. It's so cute. Look at the little baby wall of thorns. Look at it. It's so adorable. I just want to pinch its little cheeks. I really do. That being said, this card suffers from the same problem that I was just talking about with viral weaponization, where this card is not bad. This card is not bad. By normal standards, it should be a perfectly playable card. It's just not whatever the #1 most powerful thing is right now. Because look at this. This is 4 to res, 3 strength, 2 subs, ends the run, has face check threat. Those are all good numbers. Those are all good effects. By all reasonable standards, this should be a perfectly viable, playable piece of ice. It's just not Kakugo. And that's really the biggest issue with it. It's just not Kakugo. And also, Paperclip being the primary fractor right now isn't really helping it either. But whereas Kakugo is 1 credit to break with Paperclip and hurts them every time they go through it, this is 2 credits to break with Paperclip and will do 1 damage to them 1 time if they face check it. And so, yeah, but still, in a more glacier-y type deck that's planning to grind the runner out financially, like most glacier decks do, this would normally take precedence over something like Kakugo because it costs more to break. And if Paperclip was not the primary fractor right now, the difference would be big enough that even if we were still using Corroder, even if you were still using the Corroder, the difference would be Kakugo's 1 to break, this is 3 to break. That's significant. So if you're running a more glacier deck, this would still be, arguably the better option. In T, it's 1 to break versus 5 to break, for crying out loud. It's just that right now grinding runners out to damage stuff with Kakago so they can't steal Obakatas is the thing. So now, granted, eventually Obakata and Kakago and Paperclip will rotate out, and once that happens, I could definitely see a possibility where Envelope suddenly starts becoming playable because now, the things that were bumping it off the lunch table are gone. So again, this is by all accounts, this should be a perfectly good, perfectly viable card. The numbers on it are solid. It's just competing for deck space with the number one thing in the same slot. So a while from now, once those things rotate, this could start seeing play. I could definitely see that happening in the future, just not right now. And to finish off Jinteki, we have a very awkward, very interesting little card called Mwanza City Grid. It is a 0 to res, 5 to trash, 1 influence upgrade. It's a region. It says install only on the root of HQ or R&D, and whenever the runner accesses cards from this server, they access 3 additional cards. After accessing, you gain 2 credits for each card accessed. This applies even during the run when they trash it. And so far, every now and then we've been seeing like a little weird, janky, trolly Jinteki card that messes with how the runner accesses things, but, they're usually just weird but not very good. This one could actually have some teeth to it. Like, this could actually be worth playing, and it is absolutely hilarious. Like, this is so Jinteki and so weird and so, like, against the grain of how Netrunner normally works, that it's just, if you can get this to do anything, it's outstanding. It just feels ridiculous. So now, obviously, so of course, the first thing you think about doing with this is just being super silly in like a PE deck or something, where you just slap this down and just have the incredulous gall to be like, yes, I did put 3 Obakatas and 3 Snares and 3 Breach Domes and 3 Shikyus and 3 Chrysalis in my deck. Come at me, bro. And, that can have all the janky, goofy fun that comes with it. But I think the actual real viability in this card is to put it on HQ. Like, there it actually could have some real functioning to it, because you don't need a handful of like nothing but traps for that to be useful. Like 3 additional cards, that means access 4 total, and that means you gain 8 credits afterwards. So you could have something as simple as just an Obakata and a Snare in your hand. And that means if they hit the Obakata first and pay the damage to steal it, the Snare will probably kill them. Or if they hit the Snare first, not only do you get refunded for it, but then they probably can't steal the Obakata. Or just wait till you have 2 Snares in hand and dare the runner to run your hand. Like, that's... Now, the money does come after everything happens. So you still have to have, if you have 2 Snares in hand, you still have to pay the 8 credits to play the Snares. You just get the 8 credit, you just get refunded after that. But of course, the other big synergy this has is, like, even if you're not holding traps, you just got an agenda in your hand, they run your hand, you can basically guarantee the runner steals the agenda, and then you get a buttload of money to punitive counterstrike them with. So, like, there's definitely some potential here for, like, Obakata, Snare, punitive, Pilana or whatever Jinteki decks, where you just let the runner steal your stuff, gain a bunch of money because they stole it, and then you punitive them. There's definitely a deck here. I think there's that bacterial programming deck already does that basically, and this would definitely fit in there really well. So I don't expect this to be everywhere, but like in a certain niche, this has actual use, and just this card is just so hilarious to use. It really is. I've already fiddled with it a little bit, and it's just outstanding when this works. It just feels amazing when you get this to work. So for NBN, let's start with standard procedure. This is a 0 to play, 2 influence operation. Play only if the runner made a successful run during his or her last turn. Name a card type, then reveal the grip. Gain 2 credits for each card in the grip that has the named type. And this is actually a pretty interesting card, because this is a card with a lot of potential to it, and the usefulness you will get out of this is directly proportional to your skill and ability to know your opponent's deck and understand what kind of cards they probably have in their hand or are trying to play. So now, the obvious thing with this is just play Scarcity of Resources in EdTech and the wait a couple turns and name resource when they finally run. And that will definitely work. But it should, even just outside of that specific scenario, if you can get a good read on your opponent, you can probably get a lot of value out of this. Like if you hit 2 cards of the right type, it's a zero to play hedge fund, but you also get to reveal the runner's hand and see what's in their hand, and that's really, if you get a good hit out of this, you are getting information and money, and information and money are the 2 most important things in Netrunner. So if you can get both of those from the same card, that's 0 to play, that has the potential to be incredibly powerful. Like keep an eye out for this in high-level games. This has the potential to be incredibly important to playing certain decks really well. I'm sure I'll see it in EdTech, and hell, even if you guess wrong and see nothing, this is still a 0 to play see the runner's hand, which can still be useful at times. So, yeah, to get good use out of this, you have to be good at knowing your opponent's deck and reading their plays and thinking about what they probably have in their hand. If you've got a scarcity out, they'll stack up resources. If you're against a certain matchup like Geist or Haley, there'll be a bajillion resources. If it's late game, there's a good chance they're hanging on to events like a legwork they've been sitting on or something like that. So, yeah, but this gives you the 2 most important things in Netrunner. So if you can get a good call on this, this can be an incredibly powerful card. After that, we've got Intake. It's a 0 to res, 0 to trash ambush upgrade. It's 3 influence. It says if it's accessed from R&D, the runner must reveal it. When the runner accesses it, trace 4. If successful, add an installed program or virtual resource to the grip. Ignore this ability if they hit it from archives. So continuing the trend we've been seeing of having trace-based ambush cards, this is NBN's version. Now this one's trace 4 instead of the other ones, which are trace 3, which is an improvement, and really if it's trace-based, NBN should have the highest trace, that's their thing. But the punishment of bouncing an installed program or virtual resource is probably not that great. I mean, if it shuffled it back into the deck, I would be actually pretty on board with this. But as far as bouncing something back to your hand, it's trace 4. So if the runner doesn't have any link, they have to weigh the cost of paying for the trace versus spending this however many credits it takes to just reinstall the thing that gets bounced. So like they can bounce your paperclip if you don't pay, and you pay 4 credits to put it back down, or you pay 4 credits to match the trace to keep the paperclip. So it's not a huge trade-off unless A, you're trying to bounce something really expensive, or you're trying to bounce a virtual resource that has a bunch of tokens on it or something. So yeah, if it was shuffled back into the deck, this would actually be pretty solid. But since it's just bounced back to the hand, I'm not crazy about it. However, it does kind of synergize with Salem's Hospitality. So it's kind of sort of like that Hatchet Job Salem's combo that Scorpios had. Still, I'm not seeing a ton of use for this one. All right, so let's finish up by going to Wigglin Land. And this is Masvingo. 3 to res, 3 strength barrier, 2 influence. It can be advanced. When you res it, place an advancement token on it, and it gains end the run for each advancement token on it. So right off the bat, this is clearly just a very obvious middle ground between Ice Wall and Firewall, because it's by itself, it's literally just in between those 2 cards doing basically the exact same thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, one thing that this definitely fits really well in is that it is perfect for Builder of Nations. This is absolutely perfect for Builder of Nations because you res it, it automatically advances itself once, so it's something that they get meat damage for face checking even if it's not advanced when they run into it, which is great. Also the fact that one of the biggest problems with Builder of Nations and Advanceable Ice in general is that outside of Ice Wall, Advanceable Ice is really expensive. There's very, very little cheap Advanceable Ice, and no triple advancing the space ice to make them free doesn't count. So still, this is, and it's not super complicated, but it's definitely a viable choice. Like there are some decks that I could definitely see just swapping Firewall for this, for something a little cheaper, a little easier to get out, but still costs one more credit for Paperclip to break every time you advance it. So it's nothing revolutionary, but it's a welcome addition. There's definitely some places this is worth slotting in. And to top it all off, we've got Overseer Matrix. This is a 1 to res, 2 to trash upgrade. It's 4 influence, and it says whenever the runner trashes a card in this server, you may pay a credit to give the runner 1 tag. This applies even during the run on which the runner trashes it. So it's a defensive upgrade that protects your other defensive upgrades. And that's pretty much what it does. And at first, I thought that this would only be useful if you were running a deck that was super, super deep into defensive upgrades, like just piling a nest into the server for them to run into. But on second thought, this actually has pretty decent numbers on it all by itself. You don't need like 3, 4, 5 upgrades in a server just to be good. The way the math on Overseer Matrix works is that however much money the corp spends to use it, the runner pays twice that much money plus a click per thing they trashed. So even it all by itself, because it counts itself when you use it, it's 1 to res it, 1 to activate it. The runner has to pay 2 to trash it and then take a tag. So you pay 2, they pay 4, and a click. If there's this and one other thing in the server, like a price or whatever, then the corp pays 3, the runner pays 6, and 2 clicks, and then 4, and then 8, and 3 clicks, and yada yada yada, as you keep piling stuff in the server. So by itself, it's not bad, but with even one other thing in the server, then the tempo value you get from this is actually pretty solid. So this might be better in a not ridiculously heavy and defensive upgrade deck than you think. And I absolutely despise myself for saying this, but this is probably good in Gagarin because this costs more for Gagarin to trash, and it's sort of to trash in Gagarin, and then you just slap your frickin' urban renewals and commercial banker groups on top of this, and unless they pay a total of 5 credits and a click to get rid of the Overseer Matrix, then you just keep making your super obnoxious assets harder to get rid of over and over and over again. It's just, please don't do it. Just please, I don't want to have to deal with that. I shouldn't have told you, but this still definitely has. It might be a niche card, but it definitely has a place in those niches. I wouldn't count it out. This probably has some place somewhere to be a really obnoxious card to drain the runner's tempo. And that is Whispers in Nalubaale. That is Pack 5. We are almost done with the guitar cycle. We are almost done with Bog's premier product, and it's looking pretty good. And I can say that because the next pack has already been spoiled. We all know that, but this is a pretty interesting cycle, and you can definitely see the distinct changes in design philosophy that they've made, and I really like the direction it's going. There's some things they're trying out, and we'll see how well they work, but I definitely like the direction they're going, and I think we are all super excited for the things that are happening in that last pack. So thank you and good night.